While my cousins celebrated their victory at my grandfather's funeral, I stood there clutching a crumpled envelope, the kind that had clearly traveled across states just to land in my hands. Everyone else laughed that day. 6 months later, they were the ones begging for forgiveness. My name is Samuel Hayes, and this is the story of how the worst day of my life became the beginning of everything I didn't even know I needed. But first, let me introduce you to the players in this high-stakes family game, orchestrated by my grandfather, Edward Hayes, from beyond the grave. There was Richard, my eldest cousin, in his $6,000 tailored suit, already practicing the CEO speech he'd give once he inherited Whitestone Shipping. His sister, Vivian, hid her excitement behind oversized sunglasses, clearly planning which Instagram filter would best highlight her new yacht. Their parents, Lawrence and Margot, hovered like vultures, hands twitching toward the lawyer holding my grandfather's will. And then there was me, a high school history teacher from Cleveland, driving a worn-out Honda Accord 3 hours just to say goodbye to the one person in my family who had ever truly seen me. Grandfather Edward had built an empire from scratch, turning a single cargo boat into Whitestone Shipping Industries, and everyone wanted their slice of the kingdom. Everyone except me. I just wanted 5 more minutes to play chess with the man who taught me that the most powerful moves are the ones no one sees coming. That funeral wasn't just a farewell to Edward Hayes. It was the day I learned that sometimes the smallest gift carries the biggest secret, and that the people laughing at you may be standing on a foundation about to crumble beneath them. My alarm rang at 5:30 a.m., just as it had for the past 7 years at Jefferson High School in Cleveland. The ceiling of my modest apartment had a water stain shaped like Ohio if you squinted hard enough. Outside, my neighbor's dog barked on schedule, and I could hear Mrs. Patel practicing her morning yoga through the thin walls. This was my life, predictable, modest, and completely disconnected from the world my cousins lived in. Being a Hayes meant something in certain circles. Country clubs, private schools, summer estates, stock portfolios. For me, it meant choosing between paying rent or fixing the transmission on my car, because I had walked away from all that to teach teenagers about the American Revolution and the Great Depression. My father, George, had understood. He died when I was 15, a heart attack at his desk while reviewing contracts for my Uncle Lawrence's division of my grandfather's company. The last words he ever said were, "Samuel, don't let them turn you into someone you're not. Your grandfather did that to me. Look where it left me." 3 hours later, he was gone. My mother, Clara, picked up the pieces. She worked 12-hour shifts as a nurse to keep us afloat, always silently sacrificing. I saw her glance at Lawrence during Dad's funeral, a look of quiet anger that needed no words. Grandfather Edward was a mystery wrapped in a tailored suit. He had started with one cargo boat bought with his Navy discharge pay after World War II, and had built a fleet spanning 15 ports along the East Coast. By the time I was born, he was untouchable in the shipping world. But he didn't hand out gifts lightly. He believed in earning, in lessons disguised as presents. Birthday cards came with $20 and a note, "Make it worth more." Christmas gifts were practical, business books, online courses. The only time he seemed genuinely interested in me was during our Sunday chess games. I was 10 when he first challenged me. I lost in 15 moves. But each Sunday he returned. Gradually, the chessboard became the one constant between us. "You play like your father," he once said, frowning at my cautious moves. "Maybe I don't want to sacrifice everything just to win," I replied. He smiled, the first genuine smile I had ever seen from him. Richard and Vivian never understood. Richard had shadowed Grandfather at the office, turning every dinner conversation into a business pitch. Vivian chronicled from life as a shipping influencer, documenting yacht trips and designer shopping sprees for hundreds of thousands of followers. Lawrence and Margot were the ultimate power couple, hollow and hungry for attention, living in a mansion so large it required an intercom just to talk from one room to another. And there I was, grading 42 essays on the Civil War at a kitchen table I bought at a garage sale, feeling more fulfilled than any of them could imagine. That was my life before the funeral, before the envelope, before everything changed. The Whitestone Country Club felt suffocating that October afternoon. Edward had requested the will be read there, in the same oak-paneled room where he'd closed his biggest deals. The mahogany table reflected our faces like a dark mirror. I could see Richard adjusting his Rolex for the 5th time in 10 minutes. The lawyer, Mr. Harrington, cleared his throat. I want you all to know that Edward was specific about these arrangements. Lawrence leaned forward. We understand, Harrington. A lie everyone knew. Edward never promised anyone anything outside the office. The will began. To Lawrence and Margot, the estate in the Hamptons and the investment portfolio. To Richard, Whitestone Shipping Industries, with the condition of maintaining current operations for 1 year. To Vivian, the Manhattan penthouse and her yacht. And then, to my grandson, Samuel Hayes. Mr. Harrington pulled out a small, worn envelope with my name scrawled in Edward's shaky handwriting. Inside was a single plane ticket, New York to Napa Valley, one way, departing in 48 hours. The room was silent for 2 seconds, before Richard laughed. A coach ticket, really? That's it? I held the ticket steady, though my heart pounded. Vivian was recording, laughing at me like this was some joke. Lawrence said, "Sentimental fool, just like your father. Enjoy the wine country." And that's when I knew I would go. Not because of the ticket itself, but because of grandfather's last words to me during our final chess game. The best moves are the ones your opponent never sees coming.
The morning of my departure, the Cleveland sky was a dull gray, the kind that feels like it's holding back secrets. I double-checked the envelope in my hand, the plane ticket almost mocking me with its simplicity. Napa Valley, one way, no hotel, no itinerary. Just a location and a promise I didn't fully understand. I drove my Honda to Cleveland Hopkins International Airport, the warm brakes squealing in protest. My bank account flashed $1,847.23 on my phone, barely enough to cover the Uber and a snack on the plane. But as I watched the city shrink behind me while taxiing down the runway, I realized something. This wasn't about money. It was about trust. My grandfather had trusted me with a journey that no one else was invited to take. The flight attendant greeted me with a smile. "Sir, something to drink?" "Just water," I said, sliding into seat 32B. Middle seat, of course, perfectly mediocre, perfectly unnoticed. On either side, strangers claimed space like territorial animals, the woman on my right streaming a movie, the man on my left snoring before takeoff. As Detroit disappeared below the clouds, I thought about Richard and Vivian. Already, I imagined Richard perched in his newly claimed CEO chair, thinking he'd won the empire. Vivian probably posting photos from her yacht, oblivious to the real game happening across the ocean. I opened the envelope one last time, something I hadn't noticed before. In the corner, a tiny pencil number. 1947. My grandfather would have been 22, the year after leaving the Navy. A year that no one in my family had ever discussed. 8 hours passed in cramped silence. When the plane finally touched down at San Francisco International Airport, I felt the first taste of anticipation mixed with exhaustion. The October sun was warmer than I expected, the air fragrant with the faint scent of vineyards. I collected my carry-on and headed toward the arrivals hall. That's when I saw it. A professionally printed sign with my name, held by a man in a black suit so crisp it could have been tailor-made yesterday. "Mr. Hayes?" he asked in an accented English. "Yes, I'm Samuel," I replied cautiously. "Finally," he said, relief in his eyes. "Please, come quickly. We have a long drive ahead." The driver, Lorenzo, explained as we loaded my bag into a black Mercedes sedan that probably cost more than I earned in 2 years. "Your grandfather arranged this months ago. We've been expecting you." I asked about the destination. "Monterey Estate, an hour north in the heart of Napa. Private, secure. Your grandfather visited every September, alone, for decades. I tried to process that. Decades of secret trips? A whole life hidden from everyone else. The math didn't add up, and yet I could feel the threads of his chess game beginning to tighten. The road twisted through rolling hills, olive trees, and vineyards so perfect it could have been a Renaissance painting. Lorenzo maneuvered curves with an Italian confidence that made me grip the door handle. "How did you know my grandfather?" I asked. "My father was his driver first. When he passed, I took over. 20 years now." I realized I was about to meet the part of my grandfather's life that no one in America had ever seen, and I was the only one invited. We turned onto a private road lined with tall cypress trees. The gates opened automatically, revealing a villa of honey-colored stone, 3 stories high, terraces overlooking endless vineyards, gardens that seemed to have grown straight from a painting. My heart caught in my throat. Before I could comprehend the architecture, an elderly woman emerged. Silver hair pulled into a simple bun, eyes sharp, steel gray, just like my grandfather's. Her gaze fell on me, and without a word, I knew who she was. "Samuel," Lorenzo said softly, "meet your grandmother, Sophia Hayes." The world tilted. My grandmother? She had died decades before I was born in Cleveland. Yet here she was, alive and elegant, her presence radiating grace. "You have his eyes," she whispered, "and your father's gentle spirit. Come inside, there is so much to tell." The villa's interior matched her elegance, understated, warm, with photographs covering the walls. I saw my grandfather as a young man, laughing, standing in front of a small church. Wedding photos, Sophia and Edward, barely 20, radiant, full of dreams. "We married in 1947, she said, watching my reaction. "Edward stayed after the war to rebuild Italy. We started with nothing, a few acres of vines, a small home. He sent money to America, visited every year, but could never reconcile both lives fully." I struggled to process it all. My grandfather had lived 2 separate lives, one in America, one in Italy, for decades. And now this inheritance was mine, an empire hidden in plain sight. Sophia led me to an antique desk and opened a thick folder. Whitestone Vineyards International. $47 million in assets. Yours. She handed me documents, deeds, bank statements, operational contracts. The sheer weight of it made my hands tremble. Then she played a video on an old laptop. Edward's face filled the screen, serene, almost peaceful. "Samuel, if you are watching this, you trusted me enough to take the flight. Good. You are the only one who truly understood that some things matter more than money. Your cousins got what they always wanted, appearances. But appearances can be deceiving. The Whitestone shipping empire is hemorrhaging money. The properties, mortgaged or leased. I gave them exactly what they valued, hollow prizes." He leaned closer to the camera, sharp eyes piercing through time. "You visited me every Sunday just to play chess, never asked for anything, never angled for position. You chose teaching over wealth, purpose over power. That is why you get the real inheritance, truth, family, and assets that actually produce value. The vineyard yields 2 million bottles a year. Your uncle Augusto manages it waiting to meet you. Marco and Elera, my Italian grandchildren, will teach you everything. You are the only one ready for this game. And Samuel, your next move is yours to make." The screen went dark. Sophia squeezed my shoulder gently. "He spoke about you constantly, every visit, every story. He knew you were ready." For 3 weeks, I learned the vineyard, the business, the family Edward had kept secret. Augusto ran operations with quiet dignity, never bitter. Marco and Elena welcomed me as a brother. I discovered a side of my grandfather none of my American relatives had ever seen. Joyful, grounded, loving. And then came the call. Richard, my cousin, called at midnight. "Samuel, We need your help. Everything's gone. Bankruptcy. The shipping empire. Lost. The properties. Foreclosed. I was wrong. You were right. I smiled. The smallest envelope, the simplest ticket, delivered the largest revelation. My grandfather's final move had been perfect. The game wasn't about money. It was about trust, legacy, and understanding which pieces really matter.
The morning sun spilled golden light over Napa Valley, brushing the vineyards with warmth that made the dewy leaves sparkle like jewels. For the first time in decades, the land was truly alive, not just a collection of property, but a living testament to my grandfather's vision, patience, and wisdom. I had spent 3 weeks learning the vineyard, understanding the delicate balance between soil, vines, and wine. Uncle Augusto had been a patient teacher, explaining the machinery, the fermentation process, even the logistics of international distribution. Marco and Elena had become family I never knew I needed, showing me corners of my grandfather's life that had been hidden from America. Yet even with all this, there was tension simmering under the surface. Richard and Vivian had lost everything in the shipping disaster. Their arrogance had collapsed into panic and helplessness. I knew they would come seeking answers, probably hoping I could fix what they had squandered. And they did. Within a month, Richard's voice was trembling over the phone. "Samuel, we need your guidance. Everything is falling apart. Please help us." I took a long pause, letting the weight of their words sink in. Then I remembered my grandfather's advice: be kinder than your opponent ever was to you. "Richard," I said, finally, calm and measured, "I will help, but only if you follow instructions and truly respect what you've been given." The next weeks were a masterclass in humility and responsibility, for them and me. Richard managed U.S. distribution for Whitestone wines under my direction. Vivian, initially resistant, learned marketing from Marco and Elena, promoting bottles that reflected the vineyard's authenticity rather than just her own image. Slowly, they began to grasp the meaning of value, work, and integrity. Meanwhile, I returned to teaching, but part-time now. My students at Cleveland High were astounded when I told them I owned a vineyard in Napa Valley. Many laughed, imagining a history teacher sipping wine instead of grading essays. But I used it as a teaching tool, lessons in economics, agriculture, and the importance of understanding systems, all anchored in real-life examples from the vineyard. History was no longer just the past. It was something I could shape with my own hands. Evenings were spent playing chess with Uncle Augusto in the villa. I remembered my grandfather's words during our final game: "The winner isn't who takes the most pieces, but who knows which pieces really matter." One night, as we finished a particularly complex game, Augusto leaned back and said, "Samuel, your grandfather would be proud. You didn't just inherit the land, you inherited his philosophy, his foresight. You understand the board." I looked out over the vineyard, the moonlight shimmering on the rows of grapes. He was right. The board everyone else had been watching, the board of wealth, appearances, and power, was a distraction. The real game was here, in Napa Valley, in the legacy my grandfather had quietly built for the one grandchild who truly understood him. Months passed, and the vineyard flourished under my care. Marco and Elena's guidance turned Whitestone wines into an international success. Richard and Vivian, though humbled, became capable and responsible, finally learning what it meant to earn, not just inherit. The final revelation came during a quiet Sunday evening at the villa. I was alone examining a bottle of the Heredita 2024, the last personally bottled wine by my grandfather. On the label, in his unmistakable handwriting, "For Samuel,
who understood that the best inheritance isn't what you're given, but what you're trusted to continue. I held it close, feeling the weight of everything, the sacrifices, the losses, the laughter, the lessons, everything that seemed meaningless before, the plane ticket, the envelope, the mysterious flight, now made perfect sense. I poured a glass, savoring the complex aroma, the balance of flavors, and in that moment I realized something profound. My grandfather hadn't just left me wealth. He had left me purpose, family, and the understanding of what truly matters. The next day, I flew back to Cleveland, ready to teach, ready to lead, and ready to live with the knowledge that life's greatest victories aren't always visible to the eye. They're subtle, silent, and often wrapped in small, crumpled envelopes that seem insignificant at first, but can change everything. As I walked into my classroom, the students looked up, curious about my absence. I smiled, remembering my grandfather's parting words one last time. Checkmate isn't just about winning, it's about knowing which moves matter and having the courage to make them. I had learned that lesson. I had played my move. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The sun set over Cleveland that evening, but in my heart, the life of discovery, trust, and family shone brighter than any inheritance could buy.